frigid, barren, seemingly endless. On December the 3rd, 1961, a 63-year-old woman by the name of Andrea Barnes set off single-handedly across this barrier of ice. On December the 18th, the weather turned against her. A week later, on Christmas Day, radio contact was lost. Miss Barnes was never seen again. This was to be the final leg in a journey that had started for her nearly half a century before. A journey ending in apparent failure. She had not succeeded in proving to the world that the Earth is flat.
The Pope and many world leaders understand something. The flat Earth. If you look in the UN, you'll see the flat Earth clearly shown with the 33 degrees of Freemasonry. We've been lied to, and understanding the flat Earth, climate change, connection, you will understand that indeed this world is not what we have been led to believe. At first, you might think it's crazy, but when you look into the facts, you will find out that indeed things are true. The world's elite, the top scientists, the media have been lying to us for ages. Climate change is just one of the big deceptions of this world. You will clearly see.
Commonly held misconception that the Earth is a spherical object that revolves around the Sun. But the fact is, of course, that the Earth is a circular dish surrounded by a barrier of ice that explorers like Andrea Barnes have been attempting to penetrate for centuries. In 1585, amid a storm of controversy and under cover of darkness, an adventurer by the name of Afton Marcella stole out of London in hopes of being the first to reach the edge of the Earth. But he was unprepared for the extreme conditions. His crew was plagued by scurvy and frostbite, food supplies ran low. Marcella was forced to turn back before setting foot on Antarctica. So ended the first recorded expedition.
I've come across some maps that need a further look. Monte Urbano lived from 1544 to 1613. His manuscript map of the world book was published in Milan in 1587 and added to in 1589. We can clearly see other lands at the southern edge. At the centre are the 4 Bargas Islands, but a unique shade of blue ink seems to have been added on top. Very strange. This blue ink is also evident near Brazil. And was this map tampered with? In other parts of his book, Monte Urbano clearly showed lands at the north, with rivers and mountains. No strange blue ink here. Green forests were presented on these giant bits of land, and yellow deserts. Also mountains. What is going on here? Here he wrote Terra del Fuego, the land of fire. And in Argentina he wrote the region of the giants. Again we can see mountains and land. This map is by Gennaro Pichicaro from 1597, and this also showed lands in the south. Also it showed some lands in the middle. He labelled this area Circulus Antarcticus and showed strange and wonderful animals. Now maybe exotic animals like the kangaroo and koala came originally from these other lands. This is a map by Cornelis de Jodi, also from the 1500s. He also showed the Bargas Islands in the north centre. If we zoom in, we can see place names, settlement names, rivers. These are surely once explored lands. On this Mercator 1569 world map, it shows lands to the north, with mountains and rivers. Also in the south it shows other lands. And in the corner it also shows these islands at the north. This more famous Mercator map also shows these northern islands, these other lands. And here we can logically see where these most likely are. Probably still there, or under ice due to the flood that was reported around the world. Some Russian dude here says there's a magnetic mountain in the centre. He calls the middle Rupes Nigra, and states that Mercator thought it had magnetic powers. Here are some other maps that also contain these islands at the north. This image is from a Russian fairy tale. And this image, found on a similar Russian website, claims this art depicts ships from Hyperborea in the north. Mythical land. Moving on, Frank Herbert, the author of the cult sci-fi book Dune, was a Freemason, and in his book Dune, which has many esoteric and mythological connotations, he has a flat earth map with many lands. Anyway, here is some footage from Antarctica.
And you might wonder, what are sand dunes doing in Antarctica? It's not the first place in the world that you expect to go to find. Antarctica is the coldest, windiest and driest continent on Earth. Driest.
We are told these are natural breaks in the ice. It looks kind of man-made to me. Just what are these ravines? Don't look too natural to me. They certainly aren't using these little icebreaker ships to make these gouges. Or their science boat. Quick, send a science boat to the ice. What are they doing down there? What are they researching or doing? There's certainly a bunch of machinery and projects going on. And look who went there recently. Clinton, Prince Harry. What's going on? Now the new Google Earth, if you zoom in to the exact south point on Google Earth, you can see all these strange stripes. Obviously these aren't photos or satellite images. This is some CGI'd hash up. Look how strange this is. Check this out as well. If you go near the north to this little island off of Russia, and you can do this on anyone's computer, this is repeatable. Just zoom in above this island, you will come across this stripe. Where you can see sort of ice, mountains and forests within this stripe. And it's like they CGI'd over the top of it with some blue. And then here's another stripe. There becomes two stripes for a while. And you can follow this for miles. It actually points directly towards the north centre. I'm just waiting for it to load a bit here. It doesn't go all the way to the North Pole, it actually stops a little bit short. But it looks like there's some high altitude imagery that they don't want us to know about. What is going on? This is the northeast area of Russia. And there the two stripes join up. I don't know what's going on here. But this is strange. It's highly likely they are painting over lands. And here on the new Google Earth, if you go to the north, there's actually no ice there. Actually no ice. They forgot to put the ice in. And here we can see it looks like a monk. There's his sort of face. And his hands praying. And there we can see a sort of snake. Here we go, if we turn it a bit. There we go. Don't know if you can see that. Like a monk praying. If we turn it round, there's like a face. There's the nose. All global nonsense, really. It can go away.
Los humanos en su mayoría no tienen ni idea, no quieren extraterrestres, son felices, creen que tienen bien definidas las cosas.
Pero ¿por qué tanto misterio? Las personas son listas, lo entenderían.
El humano es inteligente, pero la masa es tonta, temerosa, como animales, y tú lo sabes. Hace 1500 años todos sabían que la Tierra era el centro del universo. Hace 500 años todos sabían que la Tierra era plana. Imagina lo que sabrás mañana.
In 1543, the Polish astronomer Copernicus suggested the bizarre notion that the Earth is a round ball that circles the Sun. But his book emphasized it was only a hypothesis. He further avoided controversy by withholding the book for 13 years, and then by dying on the day it was published. Edmund Halley, the highly esteemed British astronomer, best known for the comet named after him, proposed that the Earth is made up of several concentric spheres, each supporting life, placed inside one another in the manner of a Chinese box puzzle. Marshall B. Gardner, however, insisted that the Earth is completely hollow except for a small sun that lights the interior. The argument, for all practical purposes, came to an end when the Church of England was established by law during the 16th century. They rejected many laws of the ancient Catholic Church, and to appear forward-thinking, they embraced many radical scientific notions prevalent at the time, including Copernicus' round Earth theory. With this endorsement, the theory found its way into the schools, which were then largely controlled by the Church. It has remained there to this day, and many children have accepted it without question. Andrea Barnes was not one of those children. Born into an Ontario farming family in 1898, Andrea was a bright child who spent much of her time learning about the world around her. She was inquisitive and precocious, and much to her teacher's dismay, she fervently believed the global Earth concept was nonsensical and easily refuted. Many scientists agree with her and are amassing evidence to carry on her work. Part of its rotundity is that as ships sail out to sea, the tops of their masts are visible longer than the hull.
Dr. Samuel Robotham wrote, "Another thing is certain, that from within the equator the North Pole star and the constellations Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and many others can be seen from every meridian simultaneously, whereas in the south, from the equator, neither the so-called South Pole star nor the remarkable constellation of the Southern Cross can be seen simultaneously from every meridian, showing that all the constellations of the south, supposed pole star included, sweep over a great southern arc and across the meridian from their rise in the evening to their setting in the morning. But if the earth is a globe, Sigma Octantis, the South Pole star, and the Southern Cross, a southern circumpolar constellation, they would all be visible at the same time from every longitude on the same latitude, as is the case with the Northern Pole star and the northern circumpolar constellations. Such, however, is not the case. Some heliocentrists have even tried to suggest that the pole star's gradual declination overhead as an observer travels southwards is proof of a globular Earth. Far from it. The declination of the pole star or any other object is simply a result of the law of perspective. The law of perspective dictates that the angle and height at which an object is seen diminishes the farther one recedes from the object, until at a certain point the line of sight and the seemingly uprising surface of the earth converges to a vanishing point, i.e. the horizon line, beyond which the object is invisible. Thomas Winship wrote, "If we select a flat street a mile long containing a row of lamps, it will be noticed that from where we stand the lamps gradually decline to the ground, the last one being apparently quite on the ground. Take the lamp at the end of the street and walk away from it 100 yards, and it will appear to be much nearer to the ground than it was when we were close to it. Keep on walking away from it, and it will appear to be gradually depressed until it is last seen on the ground and then disappears. Now, according to the astronomers, the whole mile was only depressed about 8 inches from one end to the other, so that this 8 inches could not account for the enormous depression of the light as we recede from it. This proves that the depression of the pole star can and does take place in relation to a flat surface, simply because we increase our distance from it, the same as from the street lamp. In other words, the farther away we get from any object above us, as a star for example, the more it is depressed, and if we go far enough it will sink, or appear to sink, to the horizon and then disappear. The writer has tried the street lamp many times with the same result.
The sailor thinks that he's traveling around the Earth this way, when in effect he's traveling around the Earth this way. And he's creating a circle. He's moving in a continuous direction around. He goes through the various parts of the circle, and he comes back where he started from. He's going around this way.
Does running round your neighborhood prove that the neighborhood is round?
By the time Andrea was in her teens, her brother Andy had already decided to go into the transportation business, and many of her friends had turned to nursing as a vocation. But Andrea devoted her time to exploring the world around her and to questioning. She was vehemently opposed to the use of globes in schools and formed a group to protest what she referred to as a load of old codswallop. They demonstrated in a manner they felt symbolic. But Andrea soon realized the only way people would listen was if she made a trip to the edge and brought back proof. And so, on her 16th birthday, she set off across the snowy deserts of Antarctica with little more than a borrowed pair of skis. However, like Marcella some 300 years earlier, she was unprepared for the harsh conditions and was soon forced to turn back. She tried to raise money for a larger expedition, but her cause was overshadowed by the outbreak of World War I, and it became more important to worry about maintaining one's stake in the world than arguing over its shape. Although they never met, Andrea's mentor was this man, Samuel Burley Rowbottom, better known throughout the scientific community as Parallax. In 1881, he had published this book, Earth Not a Globe. Outlining dozens of experiments performed over many years, it quickly became the standard authority for anti-globularists. Perhaps the most significant experiments were those carried out on a canal known as the Old Bedford Level. Located in Cambridgeshire, England, the canal is perfectly straight over an uninterrupted 6-mile stretch. While there, Parallax conducted many experiments, all towards one conclusion, to prove that the surface of the water in the canal was indeed perfectly flat. In one experiment, a boat carrying a flag rowed from one bridge to another 6 miles away. An observer with a telescope placed 8 inches above the surface of the water found that the flag and the boat were distinctly visible throughout the entire distance. If the Earth is a sphere with a circumference of 25,000 miles, then over a distance of 6 miles, the second bridge should mathematically be 16 feet below the observer's eye line. But in spite of the mathematical evidence, any further attempts to restore belief in the flat Earth seem doomed by one of the supposed great moments in modern scientific achievement. At last, after thousands of years of uncertainty, man was able to get far enough away from the Earth time-lapse photography, the velocity of these clouds has been dramatically increased. While they were actually drifting over the mountains at approximately 27 miles per hour, they now have the appearance of moving at well over 100, 4 times their normal speed. If the clouds were stationary and the Earth was revolving underneath them, this is how it would appear if the Earth was spinning at 100 miles per hour. Yet we're told that the Earth is spinning at 10 times that speed. Consider this. Those who maintain that the Earth is a globe that spins suggest that people standing at the equator are being whirled around at approximately 1,000 miles an hour. They further maintain that the Earth is spinning around the Sun at a speed of 67,000 miles per hour, and that our Sun is supposedly racing around the center of our galaxy at some 600,000 miles per hour. And yet, you and I both know that on many days it's possible to stand outside without a single hair being messed up by the breeze.
You put your hand outside a window of a car which is going even at 80 kilometers per hour, a terrific wind goes blasting by and pushes your hand back. Imagine putting your hand outside the window of a car that's going 1,600 kilometers per hour. You just take your hand right off.
With a sphere of 4,000 miles radius being spun round once every 24 hours, a little bit of calculations will show that that person there is being spun round at about 1,000 miles an hour and doesn't know it. I mean, this is obvious nonsense. You go on a merry-go-round and it goes, I doubt, more than 10 miles an hour, and you get off all dizzy. You mean to tell me that people can be spun round at approximately 1,000 miles an hour and not know it? Why, if this is so, this whole room that we're in is supposedly being spun round at something of approximately that order of speed, and we don't know it?
There's all kinds of evidence for the phenomenon of what's called continental drift. This means that the continents are able to move as if they're floating on a fluid. Now, if the Earth is spherical, if it's spinning, anybody knows that if this is spinning very, very, very fast like that, that the continents should all be located at the equator, because centrifugal force would move the continents from the poles to the middle. One of the real big problems that maybe is a little bit easier to understand, sound doesn't travel nearly that fast. So, for example, if you're at the equator and you wanted to shout to warn somebody, it's quite possible they could never hear you, because if you're shouting, say the Earth was spinning in this direction, and you were shouting in that direction, the sound could never catch up to the person who's, of course, being carried away by the Earth.
In October of 1929, Andrea again tried to focus the world's attention on the controversy by proving the notion the Earth spins to be absolute nonsense. It was reasoned that if a dirigible was to go aloft in England and hold itself perfectly static, then by the accepted theory the Earth should rotate underneath it and New York should come into view some 4 or 5 hours later. In fact, England was never lost from view. The dirigible eventually ran low on fuel and had to land. Andrea insisted she had made her point. But New York wasn't paying attention that day. The stock market crash monopolized the headlines then and for some time to come. Andrea had again been upstaged. By November of 1938, Andrea was prepared for her second attempt to reach the edge. A consortium of financiers were providing her with a plane and a large enough crew to make a legitimate go of it. And so, once again, an optimistic Andrea found herself in Antarctica. And once again, fate was against her. A freak spring blizzard took them by surprise. They were unable to leave base camp, much less make a trip to the edge. The entire expedition was very nearly wiped out. That was the last attempt Andrea made until 23 years later, when she set off alone by snowmobile in 1961. Until recently, that was the end of the story. Early this year, a researcher stationed in Antarctica to study weather patterns found a snowmobile partially buried in a snowbank. It had run out of fuel and there were no signs of Andrea anywhere. But he did find these, a camera and a note. The note says only, "I have been there. The debate finally comes to an end. Signed, Andrea B." It had survived the frozen elements for nearly 30 years. Unfortunately, the researcher inadvertently opened the camera, exposing the film inside. Any pictures were lost, and Miss Barnes' trip is still very much shrouded in mystery. There was no description of what she had seen or how far away it was. But if we are to believe the note, then Andrea Barnes was very likely the first person in history to visit the edge of the Earth.
They are terrified for the secret to get out. They have been using climate change. They have been using Big Bang, evolution. We are special. We have been created in an enclosed system. All of their lies all lead back. Follow all the conspiracies, follow all the lies of the elite, the media, the scientism, religion of today. Not wanting to debate, saying that things are fact. Indeed, we understand they are not. Why would they hide it? Could it be true? The Earth is not what you've been told? Didn't we all spin that globe in kindergarten? Grade 1? From an early age we were taught, we were indoctrinated into the world system. The lies continue. We need to address these. Understand that this world you call home is not what you've been led to believe. Created us in an enclosed system. There's no danger of climate change. There's no danger of global warming. All these things are made up to enslave the population, to create carbon tax. Wake up. It's time to understand the flat earth truth.
Few universal truths in the world. One is food always tastes better when somebody else is paying for it. Universal truth. The other is that everybody in this room was taught the story of how Columbus went before Queen Isabella of Spain and he was going to prove to her that the world was round. Do you know what Queen Isabella of Spain, pretty smart woman I gotta believe, would have said to Christopher Columbus if he laid this line on her? She would look to him and go, Cristoforo, Aristotle figured out the world was round 2,000 years ago. This is 1492, the year they invented the globe. So this world is round story is 100% bullshit. It's total fiction. Yet how did our grandparents learn this? We learn this? Our grandchildren are probably going to learn this. How come? Because history is pop culture. So now, Washington Irving is America's first internationally known author. He has got a worldwide audience. So he wants to write a worldwide bestseller. And what does he come up with? The Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. This becomes the biggest hit in American publishing history. Here is where the world is round stories come from. It's not out of fact, it is totally out of his fiction. You know, Napoleon once said, history is a myth men agree to believe. Well, so many people have read this myth that it creates what I like to call the Liberty Valance effect.
This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. Say that with me. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. This is what's happened with Washington Irving and Columbus. He has created the Columbus legend. The legend has become fact, and we print the legend. When the legend becomes fact, Print the legend. This world is round story is 100% bullshit. It's total fiction. It's not out of fact. It is totally out of his fiction. Pop culture is history. This world is round story is 100% bullshit.